Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett and Gary Caton here with chapter 6 of Standing Rock Astrology, where we will talk about Mars and maybe take ourselves out even further into space. So this is a series, and I hope you'll check in with the older videos. I'm just about to start posting them on YouTube as I speak right now, November 2nd, 2016. And notice, just to share this, that there were some video issues where screen shares didn't show up and that kind of thing. And we have a bit of the kung fu mouth where our mouths don't necessarily line up with the words. That might be happening right now. And I'm just going to not care about it so much or trip, because that's not the point of this thing, to be all perfectly super clean. It's to share this information and to stand in solidarity with Standing Rock by sharing this astrological medicine for what it's worth. Last time we talked about Venus, the flower of the heavens. And I wanted to share, just because we touched on this but didn't quite finish, before we get into Mars, there's a couple more things about the Venus cycle. The black cat just crossed your path.
Black cat crosses my path near about every day, brother.
That's a good thing, I believe.
Maybe it explains a few things, right?
All right, so here we are, defend the sacred. And we looked at how Venus in Gemini on this Standing Rock chart began her quest some couple years before in 1866 in the sign of Sagittarius, and how Venus at that time was at the galactic center. And at this time of the 1968 April 29th Fort Laramie Treaty, how Venus was at the galactic anticenter. So in both cases, aligned to the Milky Way. And we were talking about the Venus transits and how there's only a couple in a lifetime. And I wanted just to share that. So in 1868, Venus was born in the cycle that began 1866. And the cycles repeat every 8 years. So that Sagittarius point of the star that Venus and the Earth and the Sun together make, they make a 5-pointed star over the course of 8 Earth years. That next time that star point aligned to Sagittarius, which was the cycle that the Standing Rock Venus was born to participate with, it was the Venus transit, 1874 and 1882. Here's what the one of 1882 looked like. Now, when we're looking at this Fort Laramie Treaty, April 29th, 1868 is a birthplace, because the Standing Rock Reservation was really like the land was born at that time, at least as the way that it was given in this treaty to be the Standing Rock Reservation. We'll see here in the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe Council logo, 1873. And that's because that's the council was born. You can read about it. I'll be linking all of these history addresses here for you to follow up in the descriptions of these YouTube posts. But the Standing Rock Agency was established at Fort Yates in 1873. And then there was an extension of land in 1875 before in 1877 the Black Hills were taken away. And we'll be going into that history more and more as we honor the progressed and transits of the chart, as we say in astrology. But I just want to say how unique I feel it is that the next time this Sagittarius cycle came around again, the Standing Rock Council was born. And the area expands in 1875. And finally, that you only get a couple of these Venus transits in a lifetime. They happen 8 years apart from one another. And we've had ours very recently, 2004 and 2012. And so there's something about this time, 1868, just before this transit, and today, 2016, just after this transit, that speaks to me in a way, I'll just say in a way again for the sacred three, but that something seeded then is also coming forth now, but in a way on the other side. So, Gary, do you have anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of the transit of Venus, linking that time where the treaty, officially formed the reservation, the Great Sioux Reservation, and we've recently experienced our version of this same thing in the opposite part of the sky. And the idea that this whole story is coming full circle in our time, right? Because you know, it was just before the transits that the thing was born, and we're just after our version of the transits. I mean, seems like a pretty significant deal to me, man.
Yeah, and especially with the power of Venus in the chart, as mentioned, Gary mentioned how she's with her node, and that brings a power to her. We saw how she's aligned in the sacred hoop of stars at the Milky Way. We saw that she's at this place of her 19-month cycle where she is high and bright and visible for the world to see, and in a sense very evolved, having been through the underworld, death and rebirth. And that was about Venus and the yin. And now we talk about Mars and the yang. So for the sake of balance, let's honor the masculine essence of Mars, or as I like to say, Venus is the inhale and Mars is the exhale. And let's see this imagery on the chart. And we are going to see a Mars in Aries. And so what does that tell us, Gary?
Mars in Aries is like probably about the most yang energy you can get. Yeah. It's Mars is extremely hot energy and dry, and Aries is, you know, the first rush of spring. So you have an extremely forthright planet and an extremely forthright sign, and I mean, I think it just speaks to the Sioux themselves as being, you know, just in blunt, you know, working man's terms, that you know, badasses, man, badass warriors that kicked the snot out of the U.S. cavalry. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's the kind of literal interpretation, right? But there's this fierce, you know, willingness to stand and to die for the truth. Yeah. It's just, it boils down to that, like just being willing to put your very existence on the line for what you think is right. And that's Aries in the warrior, you know. There's also a pioneering aspect of Aries that I think is maybe a little bit higher vibration, you know. So Mars rules Aries, right? Mars is at home in Aries, but the sun is exalted in Aries. So there's this solar energy that's connected with Aries that's kind of like the higher vibration, that's more about like understanding the connection to spirit, understanding the higher, you know, spiritual path, and being able to, right, what does the sun do but illumine things and be able to shine and show the truth, you know, to shine the light and bring awareness. Yeah. So there's this sort of pioneering aspect when you combine the two with Mars and the sun, that I think is the higher vibration of Aries. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I think that what we have here is indigenous people coming together in a way that all Americans should really think seriously about emulating, because our very existence may count on our ability to do as these people are doing, to follow their example and to make a stand. You know, we can't afford these, you know. Obama says let's let it play out for a few more weeks. Seriously? You know, Hillary says, oh, incremental change, and it's like, man, we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and Aries and Mars alike are now. They're fast. They're hot. We
want the world, and we want it.
And we've looked at this before, and how, as Gary called them in this Hellenistic term, spear bearers, Jupiter and Mercury. I mean, Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury rising before the sun in the chart here, very visible in the evening sky, bringing this fire of Aries. Yeah. And we'll see as we honor the history moving forward how there have been times where the only way that the native voice was heard was when they picked up guns and put them in their hands.
You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't lead to that, yeah? So
yeah, and thank God right now they are being very adamant about, you know, the peace and so being nonviolent.
The only way for Aries Mars to be seen if he's holding the spear or holding the weapon, and the truth is no. And I would just like to add this. Last time we spoke about with Sagittarius as the smoke that rises from the fire. Well, you don't have that without fire. And for me, Leo is the roaring flames, where we learn to cultivate our fire from which the smoke will rise. But you don't have roaring flames without the spark. And that is Aries. It is the science of fire. It starts fires. It's that commitment to the cause to start something new, that pioneering spirit. And again, that warrior spirit. The whole point of fire is to start fire, and it warms us, and it heats the food, and it separates us, as Prometheus, we're told, gave us fire in the Greco-Roman myths, from the other animals of the kingdom, because it's this one tool we have, the red flower, as it's described in the Jungle Book. But, and that's a thing too, anger and some of that fiery energy, which is no stranger to Mars or Aries, can be a source of the fire. Rage is when it gets out of control.
So, righteous anger is something that has changed the world in good ways for long history of people who, just said, think about it, right? Mars takes 2 years to go around the zodiac, right? What happens when a child turns 2? What do they learn? No, I don't want that. No, right? And to say no more, right? That is to draw a boundary and say, you shall not pass.
Gary,
right?
Do you want oil in your water?
No.
Are you willing to defend that and to defend the sacred? Yeah, and this is what we're seeing here. And so, when I look at any of these planets, I'm called to remember that I can only see them because they are reflecting the light of the sun. Yeah. So as Aries, in this warrior essence, and this pioneer, and this rising first, and this spear bearer, it's also reflecting Taurus light. Yeah. And so there's that beautiful thing with Aries, which gives us the ability to commit all of our energy to the one cause, and to get that mountain climbs and just stake our flag in its peak, if that's the scene, right? Before we're called to climb the next highest mountain, because it too must be summited, there's something about that Taurus light that says, good, now take your clothes off and swim in that pristine lake at the top of this mountain top. Chill out, right? So
maybe that's the flag planting that you need to do, right? Is actually to just, appreciate it for what it is, rather than something to be conquered,
Yeah, and plant that sensual flag, right? And connect to the rose. So we got the Aries bit reminds us that every rose has its thorn, and maybe the Taurus bit reminds us that every thorn has its rose. The Blackberry Kingdom just called to say that's actually not true. But I think you see what I'm saying there. So there's this balance, and we find this balance just as we did with Mercury. So you can watch the 4th episode of the series to learn a lot about Mercury and Aries, but we see this beautiful balance, and even more so in a sense with Mars. We talked about Mercury and Aries in the 12th house, and how that 12th houseness brings a bit of the spiritual, dream base, even kind of Piscean energy into the mix. We'll see this for Jupiter as well, also in Aries. And they're aligned to the planet Uranus, and especially Mars. Neptune, thank you. Neptune, especially Mars, is aligned to Neptune. And Neptune in so many ways is like the professor of water world. It really connects us to this boundarylessness, this we are all one. It's kind of the waters of spirit. And we can see, what is Mars doing? The water protector here, defending the sacred. And especially when we look at these cycles, as we have been for Mercury and Venus, if we say, okay, here's Mars in the frame of this film, but where was Mars born? And there's different perspectives of where you start the Mars cycle. Shamanic astrology, which is the first place that I started my study, starts with Mars when he's opposite the sun. But I've kind of been called into looking at this scene of where Mars was aligned to the sun. So in this case, it goes Earth, Sun, Mars. That's more of a traditional view, and that's where you work, at least for what we call the inception, right, Gary?
Yeah, and then there's the place where he, actually steps out from under the rays of the sun which takes a little while actually to happen. Yeah.
It's usually about 7 weeks after Mars and the sun align in this way before Mars is seen as a morning star. He has to be, what, about 15 degrees out, 12 to 15?
Yeah, Mars is relatively dim, so at least 15 degrees, right?
Right, and that was actually here at the very first degree of Pisces.
Yeah.
Okay, and look, it's the same time about, and I'm just going to go to this because we were looking at Mercury and the sun aligning for Mercury's birth.
Yeah.
Also in the sign of Pisces and with Jupiter, as we saw. Oops, sorry, wrong button. So right, here was that time. It's March 8th, 1868. And Mercury is getting the new message from the sun to go forth and give the message of the Pisces Mystery School to the world. With Jupiter, who's such a Pisces energy, the old known ruler of the sign of Pisces. And here is Mars, just at this time, just 15 degrees from the sun. So this is basically also the same date of this Mars's birth, in a way, yes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is Mars's birth into visibility. Yeah, and there you go. There's that Pisces energy again. That it is just so. It's in the background, right? It's in the film, as you say, rather than in the snapshot of the birth moment. But it's there, and it's a huge part of the background energy of this chart. Is this Pisces, the water, the and the sacredness of that, and the right, the 11th house, which is this idea of coming together with like-minded people around and about the water. Yeah. So I mean, it's just amazing that you have this Pisces theme repeat over and over, and really, that's one of the things that we do as astrologers is we look for patterns. And when you see a pattern repeat over and over again like this, you really have to pay attention to that, and you have to consider it to be like a major narrative, a major theme that you want to talk to the person about, and here you go. There's Pisces once again showing up, the warrior for the water, the person who says, no, you will not put your oil in my water. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how this shows up, and how can this be? This is a chart for a treaty,
right?
But it created the reservation as we know it, and it was and so it was a moment that the consciousness of that piece of land as a distinct entity was sort of came into our awareness, right? And there's this background cycles that are happening that surround that moment that are all about this Pisces, and so, wow, I mean, the chart really speaks to this idea of mini wikone, water is life.
Water is life, and defending the sacred water, and
the water and
Mars's side, right? So let's just explore this theme, which is so obvious. So we've got these kind of early morning risers, like rising before the sun. Jupiter, Mars, Neptune can't be seen, but that's kind of the point of Neptune. And Mercury, all rising before the sun, all in the sign of Aries, which is such a sunrise, such a solar charging out in front energy anyway. They're all reflecting Taurus light, or we wouldn't see them, connecting us to that bright earth in a sense. We'll look at these aspects to the moon and to Saturn, especially from Jupiter, as we move along. We can look at the aspect, as we kind of mentioned last week, between Mercury and especially Venus here. But for now, just to look at these three spear bearers, these three visible morning rising, scouting out the land before the sun rises, Aries energetics. And what's so amazing here is, we see this kind of 12th houseness, which brings in a sense, a Piscean field, as I called it, the waters of the womb. And Gary shared so much about that when we were doing the Mercury episode, chapter 4 here. And Neptune brings a bit of that to the mix too, but especially when we go back in time and see where these cycles started for all of these Aries planets on this chart. I mean, it's amazing because basically on this single day, really, I mean, for Jupiter, it's going to be a couple days later, right? But
Yeah.
March 8th, 1868 date is not only Mercury aligning between the Earth and the Sun to get the new message, as we say that's happening at the time, to do a 4 months worth of Pisces. Mars is born on the same day, having separated 15 degrees from the Sun, so we can actually be seen with our eyes rising before the Sun in the sign of Pisces. And if you remember, we looked at a couple, the solar eclipse before 1868, April 29th, and we saw that it was right here in these degrees of the zodiac because the node of the Standing Rock chart is right there. So Mars was also born in this way at the Standing Rock South node, almost exactly. And this is just about the birth for Jupiter. So all of these planets, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Aries, in the 12th sign of this Pisces or Taurus rising chart, yeah? All of them, however, also carrying this Piscean energy being born there. In fact, it's March 10th, just 2 days later, when the Sun and Jupiter align. And Jupiter gets his mission for 399 days. But if we look to the one with Mars, as we're kind of called to right now, it was that March 8th time where he rose in Pisces, and yet he was, in a sense, conceived, or our brother Adam Gainsbourg's word for this is Mars's inception.
Yeah.
In the sign of Capricorn, in the trunk of the tree, in the wisdom of the earth itself, the roots, yeah? And in the 9th place of this chart, the place of the vision quest, right?
Yes.
So amazing. And I think, Gary's, just because we're seeing this theme, as you mentioned, not only in Mercury and in Mars, but in Jupiter as well, maybe we can take this out a little further out into space, follow that exhale of Mars. We'll cross the asteroid belt and come back to it another time, but find our way to the gas giant guru, Jupiter.
Yeah, do you want to look at Mars's place in the sky before we go to Jupiter?
Yeah, well, we saw it last time. I'll dial it up.
With Pegasus and everything, yeah.
With Pegasus, and even more so. So folks that didn't see the last episode with Venus where we talked about Mercury aligned to the fish and also to Pegasus, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that winged horse, Pegasus in the sky, and I'll dial up the sky view right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Pegasus mythology about this flying horse and these heroes that ride this flying horse, and the freedom that it gives a human being to be on horseback. I mean, when you have to walk, where you're going, like, you can walk maybe 20, maybe 30 miles a day if you're in a really good shape, but you can ride 100 miles on horseback. It's so the freedom that it gives is amazing, and the ability to sort of, it's kind of like, I remember when I first got a mountain bike, I had dogs at the time. Now I'm a cat person. I'm a cat slave. But I remember the first time I got on a mountain bike and my dogs were like running alongside me, and they were like, woof, woof. They were like, dude, let's go, And that whole ability to, become like the wind, right? Remember that Gemini energy of the Venus, that to become like the wind and to ride the wind. I mean, it's just, these are people of the horse. The horse was very central to their culture. And so I think it is very significant that, that constellation's right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll show that here when I share screen. So many windows. Right. So here we go. Right. So this is Mercury, Mars, right with Neptune, which can't be seen, and Jupiter, all rising before the sun. I mean, if I brought in the sunlight here, we would see that they've gone away. But if I go back an hour, Jupiter rose before the sun. Here's Mars rising from the sun, before the sun. And Mercury's just at this place where maybe visible, maybe not, before the dawning sun takes the messenger from our view. But without a doubt, both Jupiter and Mars would have been seen on the horizon. And here they are aligned to this very bright, near square of stars, which is the body of Pegasus above. And so in the last chapter, we talked a bit about this whole mythos of Cepheus and Cassiopeia and Andromeda and Perseus and Medusa and Pegasus. So you can see that there. We won't go back into it. But Jupiter, more than any of them, really aligned to the square, like visibly so. And also to this fish. So I think a lot of that energy comes in, and the Jupiter alignments themselves, you know, maybe before I go there, we just talk about, because this is a pretty significant difference, right? What is the difference between Mars? What does Mars really represent on an astrological chart? And Jupiter, what does Jupiter represent?
Yeah, right. So Mars is, the glyph for Mars is similar to the sun, that it has a circle, right? But in the sun, the center is there's a dot in the center, right? So it represents an individualized essence of the eternal spirit, yeah? And it, right? Boom, that's what you are. You are an individualized essence of eternal spirit. That's what we are, each. But with Mars, you take that dot and you externalize it, right? And you bring an arrow point to it. So it's like a laser. It's like a laser pointing at into a single point and becoming fixated on that point, so that I must have that, I must reach that point, I must, you know, get that thing or that idea, or stop something from crossing that point. Yeah, in the case of a defender. So it can be aggressive or defensive, right? Just like in sports, you play offense and defense. But that's the difference with Mars, is that it's exteriorized, so that it's focused, so that spirit is brought to bear, you know, in the material world, because technically there's a cross there that's kind of sharpened into a point, right? So Mars is the opposite of Venus. It's
right. We could add that the old glyph for Mars actually is that opposite of Venus, that it used to be Venus is the circle of spirit over the cross of matter, and Mars was the flip of the cross of matter over
the circle of spirit.
It's one reason why I love to say that She and the yin is about the inhale between us and the sun, and that he and the yang is about the exhale out into interstellar space, you know, out into the outer planets. That arrow, it's alchemically, that's when the arrow comes to the circle of spirit, it's the symbol for iron, and we know Mars is the iron planet. But there is also that outward expression. And when we see that arrow and think of the spear and this kinds of things, I mean, especially in this case, Aries, yeah, we definitely feel that like warrior essence. But again, reflecting Taurus light, a warrior for the earth in the simple ways. Yeah,
and
really.
for the tribe, yeah. And even in the sense of like, just, you know, the whole practice of what they called counting coup, yeah, where you would just go and you would just touch someone with your stick, just to say, could have got you if I wanted to, yeah. Like, it was a way to show your bravery and your skill and your horse and your audacity, and like, it was a way to train as a warrior without actually having to go out and kill people for no reason, right? You could wait. It's not time to be on the warpath, but I can count coup while I'm waiting for an honorable fight. Yeah, it's that exteriorization of this, you know, energy, of this yang energy that separates me from you. I'm really good at blank. Anytime you say I'm really good at blank, you're talking about Mars. Mars is in search of that excellence, wants to set him or herself apart from the rest of the tribe in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And so we have that Aries Mars racing to the front, rising before the sun. He's quick, you know, he's strong. There's a fire, but reflecting Taurus light and being born visibly so in the sign of Pisces, in that place close to the South Node that we really talked about in the third episode of this sharing. And I'm going to share this. It looks a little dorky because it's a Excel file, but this is something where we're looking at these synodic cycles. So zooming out of the frame of the film, Aries Mercury, Gemini Venus, Aries Mars, and looking to these greater cycles as we've been sharing in these last few episodes. Here's that Mercury, who was in Aries at the time of this birth, but was seated in Pisces. Here's that Venus that we spoke about, who was in Gemini at the time of this birth, but was seated in Sagittarius. And as we shared last time, ascending between the sixth gate, or the third eye chakra, and the seventh gate, or the crown. And here is this Mars. So the inception, or kind of the conception, was in Capricorn, and then emerging visibly so in the sign of Pisces. These are color coded for elements. And then at the time of this birth, in a Pisces cycle, but in the sign of Aries. And while Venus, as you can see, Mercury's kind of right in the middle of his cycle. He's just heading into transformation, as we talked about. Venus has been through it and has come back, and she's at the end of her cycle in a very wisdom state. This is Mars, who has a 24 to 26 month cycle, and he's pretty young here. Yeah. He's, I ran this according to Adam Gainsbourg's soul sign astrological look at what's called the Mars synodic cycle. And he calls this place of Mars the exploration place. And, you know, Adam would maybe be the guy would be the guy to bring on about these qualities that he shares as inception, preparation, emergence, exploration, identity challenge, maturity, transcendence, reorientation, resurgence, destiny, service, elder, transition, right? This is this Martian energy. And it's, I think, often true to the Aries spirit anyway. The young place, a fiery place, there's an exploration to it. There's that pioneering spirit. And it's really carrying us with the essence to have a renewal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, in many ways, this is an exploration of like a new chapter of evolution for the tribe, man, because, you know, like we said, they started out as like a Great Lakes or middle, you know, we don't know where they started out actually. We just know that before they were a plains tribe and horse-centered tribe, they came from like the Great Lakes or Midwest, what we call the Midwest region. So this part we're talking about then inaugurates like a new sort of chapter, you know, for them. And so with that, you know, with having to put down the weapons and take up the reservation, it's like that Mars, you know, inception or not inception, but emergence in Pisces reminds me of like the spiritual warrior, you know, like this is the same thing that Gandhi and Thoreau were talking about, right? To like nonviolent resistance. It's still warrior energy, very much so, but it's nonviolent. It's not about conquering. It's about, in terms of physical, it's about conquering in terms of the spiritual.
Yeah, and how long can that be held when the National Guard is bringing in pepper spray and loaded assault rifles and tanks and locking people in dog kennels and all of these atrocities that are happening out there? You know, that somebody started a fire recently. A woman was arrested for taking shots that she didn't take. It's starting to get really sketchy. And one of the beautiful things here, because again, as we honor some of the history here, we look at like the AIM movement in 1973 is really profound to me at Wounded Knee, because the only time, I guess, the time where that really came into the public eye was that people, these native people brought weapons in and took some hostages and took a place. And we don't want to see that happen. That we know is not what's going to bring change. And, you know, the great leaders like Gandhi that you mentioned have taught us this. But one thing that contributed then, and we have even more resources in this way for those of us who love and care, as you and I do, and this is why we're sharing, is these many millions of people who have checked in through Facebook to this place have shared that we are connecting through this media as well. And this is a thing that has been associated with Neptune for some time. When Neptune was discovered in 1846, photography was just coming around, then film came on. In 1873, one of the reasons why public support was really happening for the AIM movement and the natives that had taken Wounded Knee was that the media was covering it. In fact, one of the things that the Department of Justice first did to take them down a level was to kick the media out, right? And you know what happened is Marlon Brando refused his Oscar for The Godfather because of what was happening at Wounded Knee, and all this attention returned out there. So, and we see on this chart, Mars in Aries, the warrior, we see he's born in Pisces. He's the warrior for spirit. He's the warrior for the water. We also see him with Neptune. And so there's this thing, I think, where if the media can come in, and this is part of why we're sharing here, and this is part of the gift of Facebook and people uploading these videos of what's happening there, though the major market media is not broadcasting this at all at our time, we are evolving into a place where this media that in some we could say has been used to like program us is now giving us an opportunity to connect worldwide and share our hearts in this way and to defend the sacred without weapons. And they used to say the pen is mightier than the sword, but this is way beyond the pen at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, you can go to, you know, the Sacred Stone Camp and you can donate to them. You can, you know, they've got T-shirts for sale that say, you know, I stand with Standing Rock, and there's various other ways, you know, different, you know, legal funds that are helping these people when they do get arrested. I think it was called I had written it down as the Red Owl Legal Collective that's helping them out in their court cases. There's civil CLDC, which is what Civil Liberties Defense CLDC.org, right? There's GoFundMe's for, you know, the different Standing Rock organizations that you can participate in. And so, yeah, it could be like this mass movement of people who aren't there necessarily standing there and getting shot at and stuff, but they can still be a part of the thing and still help spread awareness and still put their heart energy into it, you know. And that's the thing about these modern planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They were all discovered by teamwork. Uranus was not discovered by Herschel. Herschel thought he saw a comet. And then the famous comet hunter Messier said, that don't seem like a comet to me, dude. And so they got together with a bunch of other people and they started comparing observations. And, you know, they said, well, you know, these people said they saw a star here and then later it wasn't there. I wonder if this is the same thing you were seeing. Mm-hmm. And they started adding them together, and all these many observations both just began to add up. Oh, this is a planet. Yeah. Yeah. And the same thing happened with Neptune, where I think it was a couple academics, but they also had a student that was involved. And there was all of these planets were discovered through a collective effort. So they represent collective forces and collective.
Even more so with Neptune, because Uranus was discovered with technology, with a telescope. Now Uranus, I'm told, and I'm going to Arizona this week to see if I can do this, but sometimes you can see it with your naked eye. Yeah. Neptune, you never can. And Uranus was discovered with a telescope, and Neptune had been calculated mathematically of where it should be, because it was noticed that Uranus was having this pull by something out there. And so they found Neptune with a telescope, but they knew where to point it because it had been mathematically calculated. Why? Because we're all connected. We all have pull on one another. We're all in the same boat, or we are all the same water would be a better way to say this. And
gravity, yeah.
This idea of Neptune, like we're literally you're watching this right now. You've watched different videos. I will be linking in these descriptions more challenging videos about some of the history that's gone down here. And the more that we can bring our own awareness to this, the more that we can tell people out there. Like a lot of people don't know about Standing Rock right now. What if they did? The more that we can spread the word. And also, as Gary said, like we can connect in prayer, we can connect in any way that we can give or bring awareness, but we can also give money to many of these great places. And Gary, I'll ask you later to send me some of those links that you mentioned so I can also post those below. I'll be posting a campaign where you can contribute to the medical tents at Standing Rock, which I think is a very important cause. Yeah. And this is also an invitation to anybody watching. If you want to leave a YouTube comment, with other links of where people can contribute. This is a great way we can give. If we can't give in presents, we can donate jackets and boots and tents. It's about to be very cold over there.
And they need the real winter stuff, right? If you're going to send that, send the really hard, heavy duty, man. It's cold as heck in North Dakota.
Absolutely. And we have to imagine like an entire village is being built here, right? In a place that has not hosted a lot of people. And to keep bodies on the site in protest, in water protection is going to be necessary for those in public office who are saying, oh, let's just see how it goes and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
well,
they're hoping it just goes away, right?
Right. Is oil in your water is how it goes. And I think it's beautiful to think about Jupiter now, who's in Libra, who's in the sign opposite Aries, where Jupiter was on this standing rock chart that we're looking at of April 29th, 1968. I think if we look at Jupiter on this chart at a world point, at the vernal equinox point, that says a whole lot to us. And Gary, I just want to check in with you. Do you want to continue out into space and speak about Jupiter?
Let's go. Sure.
All right, cool. So we talked about Mars as matter over spirit, or that exhale, or that spear, and that forward direction. Well, Jupiter is the crescent of soul over the cross of matter. Soul over matter, yeah. And
soul triumphing over matter, yeah.
Jupiter in general, I mean, one way that I like to feel into Jupiter is to look at that eye, that giant storm that's 3 times the size of Earth, and to picture it as like the eye of the good father, of like the higher father that's looking down on us and saying, it's okay, I got your back, we're going to make it through. Yeah.
Etymologically, that's actually a really good point, because in terms of the way that we get the word Jupiter, it comes from Deus Pater, bright father. Deus Pater, Jupiter, yeah, means bright father. So there's a very, it's like the good father, it's like the nurturing father. And there is a very real reason why Jupiter is called the greater benefic. So it's this protective energy, right? If you've got Jupiter in the house, you can get away with a lot more, which is actually a problem because of that protection. But literally Jupiter's gravity protects the Earth from bombardment from all these space particles that get sucked into his orbit, right? We saw that not long ago. There was a comet that and they saw, they witnessed the explosion of that comet, going into Jupiter. Well, that thing could have hit the Earth, except Jupiter's so massive. Literally, Jupiter protects the Earth from all kinds of bombardment that would otherwise make life pretty much impossible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's really fascinating that it's considered a protective or benefic influence in astrology. And yeah, that's kind of what it does in real life too.
Yeah, one thing you just said, well, totally in real life, and I feel this thing in the mysteries or the mythologies of the Greco-Roman tradition, it's like Jupiter will be the one to bring the flood or that kind of thing if humankind loses reverence or engages with hubris. We were speaking about this a bit last time. And very physically so, Shoemaker Levy comets that weren't long ago, right? If Jupiter didn't take that one for the team, which includes Earth, we very likely could have been done. Dinosaur extinction style. Yeah. We can do this to ourselves, and hopefully we won't. And that's the point of Standing Rock in many ways, not to extinct ourselves or any of our nations and peoples. But a comet could do that trick pretty quick too. And so there's something about Jupiter stepping in, and he often does and often has to, in a sense, take one for the solar team, because he's a large body out there and the greatest electromagnetic field in the system, and there's a lot of mysteries about Jupiter.
Jupiter actually sends out more energy than he gets from the sun, right? So Jupiter is just about this far from becoming a star, essentially. There's so much mass there that it's sort of churning out energy almost like a star does, so that, if there was just a little more mass, it would have collapsed and become, started the whole nuclear fusion reactor that stars do. Yeah. So, Jupiter is really a trip. And, this idea of rising, of the soul rising above matter. And so Jupiter's associated with higher learning and exploration, and again, this divine protection and so forth, all of those sorts of things where, you get sort of where you're able to sort of like forget about your troubles for a little while. Yeah. All those kinds of things.
The way you said good father earlier, I kind of heard Godfather again, because I had just been speaking about Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
As you were just sharing, I looked up his birth chart. And we had seen a couple episodes ago with Mercury, Bernie Sanders, who's written this amazing letter to Barack Obama, which is just like, this is the truth, make this thing stop. It wasn't like the, play it nice for all sides things that we've heard from other political camps recently. It was real, it was true. Aries has this essence of getting right to it. Yeah. And we saw briefly in that other episode, in the synastry, as we call it, between Bernie Sanders' chart and the Standing Rock chart, we saw Bernie's Aries moon and Mars very close to the Standing Rock Mercury. Okay,
Yeah.
So we'll look at this with like Standing Rock in U.S. and future episodes. But I just love to share this with Marlon Brando, because I just looked up his chart. I can't tell you how close this is to his. This is just a quick internet search. But we see a Aries new moon basically right where the Standing Rock Mars is. And also an Aries Mercury.
So, there you go.
Yeah, right. And this is astrology, right? There you go. So this is like a tie between that man and this Standing Rock chart, or a tie between Bernie Sanders and this Standing Rock chart, that has him stepping in to defend the sacred in this way. So Jupiter, just like Mercury and Mars, rising as a morning star, rising in Aries, in the 12th sign of this chart. We saw also that when we rewinded time, not only was Mars and Mercury born in the sign of Pisces, but if I go back to March 10th, 1868, here is the Earth, Sun, Jupiter alignment.
Zoom that forward a couple weeks, will you, Brett? See when Jupiter actually emerged from under the beams.
So, yeah. And he needs to be about 15 degrees separate, Gary? Right? So,
yeah, he's still in Pisces with Mars. Yeah.
With Mars, right? And it's really amazing that we see Aries, Mercury, Aries, Mars, Aries, Jupiter. But there's this time before, and it's actually as the sun is meeting Neptune, and they're all now visible. In fact, this is Mercury most visible.
Yeah.
In Pisces. And there's this current, again, as we zoom out of the frame of the film and honor the scene, where are these warrior communication travel of Mercury, the warrior of Mars, the spirit, this good father, godfather of Jupiter, all in Aries, but they're kind of coming from this alignment in Pisces too. And Jupiter's known for being Pisces in many ways, which carries faith, which carries spirit, which carries that connection of the water, that we are all one, these many themes. Yeah. And
in the future, it's about being able to see, the big view, right? Because Mars takes 2 years to go around the heavens, whereas Jupiter takes 12. Yeah. So being able to see beyond the moment to the big picture, guess what? There's a protective quality to being able to do that. Yeah. You can see the big picture, you can see things coming, and you don't get blindsided, right? There's actually a wonderful, we're going to eventually get to Saturn, right?
Yeah.
So there's a wonderful clip in the movie Dances with Wolves, right? Which is about Native American people. I'm not sure what tribe is being represented there.
It's probably Inuit, because it was up in Alaska, I believe.
Okay. I thought it was like Missouri or someplace like that, but I don't remember.
I drink too much tea, man.
Yeah. But anyway, the guy who is the Jupiter in that is his name is Kicking Bird. He's the medicine man. Yeah, he's their person who is supposed to be the Jupiter role to, and he literally says, so there's this weird stranger, right, arrives in their land, and he's trying to revive this fort and stuff, and they're like, what's up with this guy? And so the warrior, wind in his hair, he says, these people are weak. They can't even survive a full winter in our country. We should fill him full of arrows, and we'd be doing him a favor, yeah? And Kicking Bird says, well, he says, I don't know. There's something about this guy. I think he might have some kind of special medicine. This is in council, right? They're having a council, right? And so Wind in his hair says, yeah, if he has special medicine, when we fill him full of arrows, he'll be okay.
You know, Jupiter, I think this is lost to a lot of folks, but Jupiter has a pretty trickster thing going on too, you know?
Yeah, and I think, just to finish the story, I think what Kicking Bird says, well, I think maybe this guy can tell us something about the future. I think maybe we need to talk to him, right? So the difference between Mars and Jupiter in terms of like the Greek style qualities, Mars is dry. Mars wants to get rid of this person, cut them out, right? Dry, separate. Jupiter says, I want to join with this thing. I want to become one with it to see what it's about. I want to share. I want to see this, if he's got this special medicine, right? And then what is the chief? I think he was 10 Bears was his name. He says, he says, these are very delicate matters. And, taking either of these courses of action could have long lasting, ramifications. So what we should do is nothing. We should wait and get more information, right? Because it might turn out that the warrior's right. He might not last the winter, or it might turn out that the Jupiter guy's right, and he shows some kind of special medicine, and then we can talk to him, right? So I just think it's really interesting. You can see, to me as an astrologer, I see the three planets, the three male planets, right, and their relative speeds correlating with the speed of the action of the characters. There, Mars says, go get him, and Jupiter says, well, maybe we should, have some dialogue, and Saturn says, no, we should just chill and do nothing,
We should say that too about these Aries planets, Mercury and Mars and Jupiter, where they are in their cycle. I mean, Aries itself is a fast sign, that spark, they're all moving quickly at this time.
Yeah.
Like when the sun aligns between Earth and Mars, that's Mars at its fastest. Yeah. And the same thing with Jupiter and Mercury, who's just past the Earth, and he's moving back like behind the sun. He's on his way down. Like that's a fast Mercury. So there's a lot of speed here.
Yeah, and Jupiter, I think the way, we have, not to get too technical, but, orbits are really more like paper clips than they are perfect circles, yeah?
Yeah.
So Jupiter's, in the part that's sort of the egg-shaped part, that's where they're their fastest, and I think Jupiter's what's technically called the perihelion. I think Jupiter's fastest in Aries also. As a sign, his passage through that part of his 12-year thing is faster. So there's a lot of speed here. There's ability to react quickly and decisively. That's really beautiful. But there's also this ability to see the future and to see and to serve as a protective influence for others through one's vision. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like if we could just listen to these people and do right by them, we might be able to save our own asses in the process.
Right.
Because what they're saying is wise and true.
Gary mentioned before that Jupiter has about a 12-year orbit. He spends about a year in every sign. It gets really to 13 months. It's an interesting thing, but he's been called a year king for that reason. And the 12-year orbit, this is a very special time on the standing rock chart of that 12-year orbit, because Jupiter is at the vernal equinox point, or I should say the spring, the March equinox point, to honor both hemispheres. But he's at this place, which is called a world point, and it's one of the only two places of the zodiac, without getting too deep into sacred astronomy, that rises due east and sets due west. Okay. So the sun, as we know, every year at equinox rises due east, and In the winter, it falls into a lower expression. In the summer, it comes to a higher expression. You can follow the sun on the eastern horizon, south in December solstice and north in June solstice, yeah, every year. Well, Jupiter does that over the course of 12 years. So there's only twice a year. We just had one. This is, again, we're recording November 2nd, 2016 right now. So when Jupiter ingressed Libra, the other equinox point, on September 9th, 2016, he got very close to the perfect east rising. However, this year, it could not be seen because Jupiter was so close to the sun when that went down. And at this time, in the Standing Rock time, very visibly so, as a bright morning star rising before the sun, Jupiter would have risen due east. Yeah. And there's a very important truth because, see, that brings us to center. And what's in the center? The heart. Yeah. And so I feel there's this kind of fiery heart essence. And Jupiter himself, in India, they call him Guru. Yeah. There is a wisdom, there's a spiritual teaching alive in Jupiter and Aries. And he's saying this is the spiritual warrior. Once again, we're seeing that symbolism in
yes, exactly, yeah. And it's on the world cross, right? It's on this mundane cross of the, so literally, if Jupiter is the protector, Jupiter is the wise counsel, the guru, this tribe can serve as a wise counsel to the world, right?
Yes.
It's as simple as that. That's what it's saying. Yeah. And so if, you know, what do they say? A word to the wise is sufficient. So, you know, mini wikoni, there's a few words. Water is life. Yeah. That's all you need to know.
2 words.
It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that, man. And a word to the wise should be sufficient. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that's a really powerful alignment there with Jupiter on the vernal point.
I want to check this out too. Yeah, I mean, in mundane astrology and world astrology, these points, 0 Aries, 0 Cancer, 0 Libra, 0 Capricorn, they're called the world points. I just have a hunch and I want to see this. So I've gone back to this time and I'm just rewinding. I want to see, because Jupiter also has latitude and longitude. Check that out, Gary.
Yeah, pretty much due east.
Right? He rose literally at the 90-degree azimuth, which is, look at that, precisely east. So I had a hunch because Jupiter, though he's at the second degree, really 2 degrees, 1 minute Aries here,
yeah.
Because Jupiter also has an above or below latitude, it's not always going to be when he's exactly at the equinox point that he rises due east. And it's going to change actually when he's past it, like he is here, depending on how far you are from the equator. So It was at Standing Rock on this very day. And this literally only happens twice in 12 years, once every 6 years, that Jupiter rose due east.
Like you said, sometimes it's not even visible, right? So not even twice every 12 years. Yeah. So that's like a really seriously powerful wisdom aspect.
Yeah, when I'm helping people build stone circles or whatever, you know, we can work with the sun to find east. I mean, so north, we get the North Star in our day and age, and that's very beautiful because we have pretty much due north dialed in from the sky. Your magnet is not true, that star is. But east and west are a little bit more difficult. So traditionally, you might wait for an equinox, but the issue there is the sun is huge. It's like half a degree in the sky, and it's bright, and it's hard to tell exactly where it is, especially when it's rising. This is not true for Jupiter. He's a needle point, such a bright light. In the old days, called like the greater of the benefics, right? But dialing in due east here, and what is east, right? East is the place of the rise, a new way. Yeah, so there's a new spiritual way here, not just in the essence of Aries itself. And we see a lot of charge energy and morning energy Aries, as we've looked at again and again here. But there's a new spirit coming through this. And that's my prayer. I mean, my prayer, first of all, is the return of the old spirit, to get back to Mars, who was first visible in Pisces, Aries by the time of this chart, but still seated in Capricorn, seated in the wisdom of the land, fighting for the truth of that, returning the truth of the elder spirit. That's so much part of the point of this thing and reflected in this chart. but there's also a new emerging fire, a new spark of spirit that comes through. And my only prayer, you know, through all this pain and this torture that's already happened, we cannot change that, is that a new essence and a new spirit emerges. And Gary, you shared about like the rainbow prophecies before of the tribes, many colors coming together. Yeah. And maybe that's what this is about at this time. And with Jupiter and Libra on the other side, maybe there's some symbolism there. Do you feel that?
Yeah, man, I feel it. I feel like, wow. I mean, it's remarkable that there's this is the greatest gathering of tribes that were, you know, traditionally, some of these tribes were fierce enemies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all coming together. This is the largest gathering in the last 100 years of the First Nations. Yeah.
Yeah, tribes that were enemy at the signing of this treaty that actually, and you can read the language of the Fort Laramie Treaty. I'll post that in the link below too. Like, kind of, it demands peace between the tribes as well that have been at war for some time. Peace between the tribes and the white man, right? So not honored by this side, unfortunately, taking land. But also in those tribes where there had been some, as we're told by some of them, shady dealings from other tribes, giving their position away to Custer, these kinds of things. In this time now, at Standing Rock now, they're coming together. They're sharing the nupa, the pipes, smoking sacred tobacco. Pipes that haven't been lit since like literally this treaty was signed have just been lit out there for the first time in hundreds of years. Yeah.
It's remarkable. It really is.
Tribes coming out from Hawaii and from South America and from Latin America and from all around the world. And there's also like the white man tribe coming in. Yeah. And that's been a really beautiful call. There's an interview I conducted with a woman called Victory Lundquist that I'll also link below. I encourage you to watch. But she's out there and she's just like been really encouraging like the Burning Man tribe to come in. Like these people know how to build village in harsh climate. And these kinds of things that people have been learning, like in the festival culture, kids went there to party. And then 10 years later, suddenly they're having a spiritual awakening. They're actually in the moment. And now they're into permaculture and village building and compostable toilets and these kinds of things. And this is how the earth is starting to speak through this color of the rainbow, which, you know, I got a false light here, I guess, making me look a little bit redder than usual because I'm a pale Seattle boy these days. But, you know, we are also part of that. We are also a tribe, and all of the tribes have been invited there to participate. So, yes, there's anger, you know, because people have been betrayed. But more and more, what I'm feeling when I'm speaking to elders of different nations around here in the Northwest, it's not anger at me, you know. It's not general anger at the white man. It's anger at those who have caused this issue. And it's an invitation for those of us who don't want to be part of that anymore and want to return ourselves to righteousness and honor and sacred into the land.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this coming together, like I said, I think it's like what we see here is a microcosm of something that could potentially happen on a much bigger level. Look, we are many, right? There's so many more of us than there are the people who take these privileged power positions and who think they can say what, you know, like, you know, what pipeline goes where and what doesn't, right? We're so many more than them. If we simply come together in solidarity, they can't push us around anymore. You know, it's that simple, man. I mean, look, the year I was born, in April 1968, do you know what was going on over in France? If you go over to France, in France you say 68, 68, yeah? You go over there and say 68 and see if people, 68 tard, yeah, 68er. It's a big deal, man, because they all came together and they said, no, we don't want any more of this, you know, and there was a huge shift in the politics of that entire country because of people coming together around, you know, a political cause and stuff. And that's what a lot of people thought was going to happen under Uranus square Pluto, right? They thought, oh, it's a return of the 60s. And that hasn't happened yet. But, you know, what you mentioned about Jupiter and Libra, it's interesting because, you know, one of the simplest divisions of the zodiac is that you have what are called northern signs and you have what are called southern signs, yeah? So that, in other words, the sun is north of the equator in Aries. That in fact, the zero Aries is by definition the point where it first starts to go north of the equator. And then in Taurus is a northern sign, and Gemini and Cancer is the
Right.
first.
So spring and summer in the northern hemisphere are northern signs,
Because the
and
sun has
autumn and
northern
winter
declination.
southern
There's
hemisphere.
more light. There's more light than dark, yeah. And then in the southern signs, the sun goes, like you said, down, and there's more dark than light, yeah. So what happens when it gets dark? Humans don't have eyes like cats. We don't have those reflective membranes, and that we got to huddle together. We got to come together when it gets dark for protection. So the southern signs in general are also thought to be more social, right? It's also like in the dark time of the year when you're not out tending your crops, what are you going to do? Well, you come together and you talk about how you're going to do it next year and stuff, and you hash things out. So there's this interesting quality where now that Jupiter's in Libra and Saturn's in Sagittarius, with the only one of the planets from Jupiter out, right, that's not in those southern signs is Uranus. So you begin to have this, now that Jupiter's in Libra, you begin to have this emphasis towards the southern signs and towards this social coming together, right? That I think is very hopeful in the sense of like honoring the Jupiter in this chart and this world point of this wisdom of seeing what's coming down the road and coming together around that.
Yeah, I love that, Gary. It was 999 numerologically, 9/9/2016 when Jupiter ingressed Libra, and actually he stays there till 10/10/10 because 2017 numerologically is a 10, and he leaves and moves into Scorpio on October 10th, 2017. But on that date, I mean, there's very significant things happening with Standing Rock. It was coming to public attention that had been happening for months and months before.
Right.
And the Supreme Court denied the movement by Standing Rock Reservation to protect their land, according to the treaty, right? At the same time, this letter came out that was from the Department of Justice, Department of Interior, and the U.S. Army Corps to recommend to this company to stop the oil pipe.
And they also put on hold any more what do you call them, where you give somebody an easement. They put the easements on hold, right? Because that's what's at issue here is an easement.
Right. And so if you read that language of the letter, and I'll try to link that below as well, I mean, it's hopeful. It's like, well, we really want to invite native wisdom at the table for all important environmental decisions in the future. And it's like, oh, this victory, and it feels good, but it's all like recommend. There's nothing hard there. And look at what's happened, right?
Yeah.
And so what I would say about that too is, yeah, so Jupiter had entered Libra, and astrologers, worldwide are like, oh, an age of peace and balance and harmony. And it's like, okay, well, let's take that a little deeper. But there's one thing where I feel that's a bit of a promise actually at this time, but not then. Because though Jupiter had moved into Libra, though he crossed this east-west point, the equinox point, he was also invisible. He was under the beams of the sun. He could not be seen.
It was the seed of that was planted, but and that's the thing, is that's why I mentioned some of these legal collectives, because it was, remember in the 60s when they sicked the dogs on our black brothers and sisters, that's when people finally said, hey, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, and so there was a lot more solidarity with the African American movement, and I think that this could be, so that in a weird way, maybe letting this play out for a few weeks could actually serve the movement in a sense of, bringing more attention and bringing more solidarity and so forth.
And I mean, I'm planning to release one of these chapters every day. So by the time this one gets out, and today's November 2nd, who knows what's going on in this regard, because hopefully this is shifting and changing fast and this voice is heard. But what I will say is that a wise man called Gary Caton once told me that when a planet ingresses into a new sign, but under the beams of the sun so we can't see it happening, it's like a border crossing at night, right? Like a little shady thing coming, right? And so then when the sun moved past Jupiter far enough that Jupiter was now visible in the morning sky, this happened mid-October, well, now he can be seen. Now we're talking about this Libra energy. from the great guru. And maybe most importantly, because we're going to look at Saturn next. Saturn, as Gary mentioned, in our time, 2016, the sign of Sagittarius, said to be ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter now in Libra just started 9/9/2016, but emerging in October, said to be the sign of Saturn's exaltation. They are in what's called a bit of a mutual reception with one another. They're casting beams at one another on what's called a 60-degree or sextile relationship. That's
going to come almost together, and then they're going to separate, and they won't get back together until later, about actually almost a year.
August next year is when it's perfect.
Yeah.
They get real close. And right now, as we're recording this, and until November 11th, 2016, with Venus in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Libra, there's even a stronger mutual reception happening there. So it's a really beautiful time, astrologically speaking, for some of these energies to really participate with one another. And I love that image you've brought forth, Gary, that these southern signs also, because traditionally on the chart, they're above the horizon. They're a little bit more about the togetherness, othership, we could say. And I think Jupiter in Libra really brings us that opportunity. We'll see how it plays out. Historically speaking, Jupiter in Libra has not necessarily been times of harmony and peace and beautiful agreement.
Well, when the darkness is increasing, people come together for a reason, right? Because the predators come out, So it's the thing. Are you going to be a predator or a brother or sister? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a choice to be made there, I don't want to get too melodramatic here, but at some point, if you're not taking the side of, if you're just calling for neutrality, then you're not picking a side, then you're on the side of the status quo, because, they're the ones that benefit from your lack of, solidarity. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm hoping that we can put all this quibbling about the election and stuff behind us and realize, that's really not where it's at. Figuring out who's going to have this, imaginary power to do whatever. Clearly, neither Hillary nor Obama are all that concerned about doing anything about this.
Yeah, and Trump actually has very visible ties to this oil company.
Nobody's counting on him to do anything for anybody anyway. Right.
Also, but who funded these campaigns? Of the other ones, why aren't they preventing this pipeline from happening? So.
So maybe we can get past all the bickering about, you should vote for this person. Vote for us. Yeah, let's vote for us.
Yes.
Let's come together and vote for us. And, and then we don't have, it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter who gets elected. You know why? Because you know how that whole thing happened in France? It's called a general strike, my friend. What that means is nobody went to work. Imagine this. What if nobody went to work for a week? What if, let's say Trump, everybody was, what if Trump gets elected? What do you do with the bully? You stand up to him. Yeah. What if Trump gets elected? What if Trump got elected and nobody went to work? They said,
And what about the other one as a bully? We just heard her write this thing, about how we're going to up our stance.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't really matter who gets elected. If we all stand together and say, you know what, we're not going to participate in this system as long as you're not, speaking to our needs, then the whole dynamic changes. Then we retake our sovereignty.
Yeah.
Like our native brothers and sisters have insisted on being sovereign nation. Yeah, we can learn from that. We have sovereignty too. We're supposed to be sovereign citizens, but we get dictated to by this president and by these Congress people as if they're kings and queens and nobles and stuff, And that's not the way it's supposed to be.
It's one of the reasons why Bernie really spoke to my heart and kind of brought my ears back to these political themes after having my heart broken by one that I was really behind in 2008, seeing the hope and change that was promised not come my way. I decided to turn it off, but this brother was starting to speak some truth, and he was saying, it's not about me. I'm not the revolution.
Yeah.
We are the revolution. And he's still speaking strongly, and I think getting behind that and realizing that again, coming into solidarity, that's us coming together. Yeah, and demanding our own sovereignty. And in this chart, right, there's this promise in this nation of a rising spark of spirituality. That's how I'm reading this due east, Aries Jupiter, morning star. He's ready to light a fire.
That's where Jupiter is right now, right? Morning star. If you go out before dawn, no matter where you live on the planet right now, even in the southern hemisphere, that's the beautiful thing about this part of astrology. Even in the southern hemisphere, you go out before dawn and boom, there's Jupiter. You can't miss it. Look east in that general direction. You know, it might be a little bit more this side or that side, depending on what hemisphere you're in. But there's Jupiter, and you can, you know, you can send your prayers that way if you choose to say, hey, you know, Jupiter's really strong in the Standing Rock chart. Jupiter's in the morning sky now, in the opposite sign, yeah, but that's okay. That same energy can be used as a vehicle for your prayers and intentions and so forth, you know, and I think that's really an amazing thing to experience. And, you know, I recommend that everybody try it. It's something that, again, it's a relationship. Like any relationship, it requires you to your attentiveness, right?
Yes.
You can't just go out, like you don't just go out on one date with a woman and then, you know, you're married and everything, right? It takes some wooing. It takes some energy. But after a while, the next thing you know, things start to happen and you're like, wait a minute, I was just out this morning and I was thinking about that and now something's happening, and like, whoa, like there's an energy exchange going on here. And I hesitate to call it anything specific because I don't know what it is, but I know that it makes a difference in your life.
Yeah, and just like it is, if you and I are sitting in the same room and sharing heart, I'm going to look at you in the eye. And why not look at Jupiter and his, you know?
Yeah, right?
Jupiter has a lot to say. Like, I've been in places, and maybe I'm just crazy, and you probably have too, Gary, where Jupiter will speak English to me. But certainly through the signs and the symbols and the numbers on the clock and the dreams, and Jupiter will hear your prayer. And I love, Gary, that you just brought in this idea of visible Jupiter, right? Because there's not only when Jupiter every 12 years gets back to Aries, where astrologically we would say the Standing Rock chart is having a Jupiter return, but there's also what's called a phase return. So Jupiter then was a morning star, and Jupiter, as we're recording this, is a morning star. And I can show you that on November 12th, Jupiter will be the same distance from the sun, which is 37 degrees, as he was on the day of the Standing Rock chart.
Nice.
And actually right opposite Mars at the time too. Yeah. So there's something I think that we're emerging into where Jupiter will carry that same, though he's on a different side of the zodiac, he's carrying that same essence of the way that he rises before the sun.
Yes, exactly.
And this is another thing I noticed on this chart that I love. We spoke about Venus last time. Well, Jupiter's right at the beginning of spring in the first signs of Aries. Northern hemisphere spring, I like to always say that. And here is Venus at the end of spring, merging into the summer solstice point. And here is the sun right
in the middle.
Right? So there's this relationship between Jupiter, Sun, and Venus, traditionally known as the two benefics, Venus and Jupiter, who are surrounding this Taurus sun at this time in quality in this way. Yeah, and an earthly sun, but kind of rooted in fire, or surrounded by these guardians of fire and air.
Yeah, beautiful.
So the other thing that Jupiter is doing here is that, you know, I love to say again, when we've talked about Mercury and we've talked about Mars, we've talked about Venus and Jupiter, we've talked about these nodes, we've talked about the sun in Taurus and the eclipse before this chart, we've talked about the moon in Leo. And I'm going to take some points away here and we'll just look at this shape of moon and Jupiter that are in what's called a trine. And then we can bring in the ringed one. And they make what is called a grand fire trine on this chart. And the way that I like to speak about the fire trine is Aries is the spark that starts the fire. As we cultivate that, come into a loving connection, a radiance with it, control it, fix it, then the roaring flames of self-love and confidence and art and creativity, Leo, of royalty, of honor, will allow that spiritual smoke to rise to the heavens. Yeah. And the smoke carries the spark that will start it again. So there's this really lovely connection here in a grand fire trine or a grand trine in any element that in this case is connecting this spark of Jupiter, the spiritual spark, to this lineage, this gnosis of royalty, of honor, a Leo moon, and then to this Sagittarius Saturn.
Yeah.
But a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn, yeah?
Sorry?
But a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn in the opposite sign from Venus, as we spoke of last time.
Yeah, it's got some issues to work out there, but yeah, this idea of the trine, right, as something that encloses a fairly a big amount of space in its interior, yeah. Whereas if you put a bunch of squares together, you get a cross, and it goes right through the middle, yeah. So a trine. So there's a difference between like something that is an active, force versus a holding space, right? The trine, to me, feels more about holding space than, the active sort of yang seed force. So, and think about what these people are doing. They're literally saying, we're going to hold space for water. Yeah. We're going to hold that. And we're going to say, no, you're not going to invade these sacred waters, and there's the fire. So there's the fire, the warrior, right? The fire is yang. But it's in a grand trine, so that it's holding space, so that it's again, it's like a spiritual warrior, right? It's not out there conquering something. It's defending something. It's holding space for something, yeah, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, and I love too, and like the alchemical expression, right? There's blades. We've spoken about this in chalices. Yeah, up and out and the down and in, the yang and the yin, and the fire is said to be that kind of highest, like. It's the unbroken blade. It's said to be like the fire rises higher than anything. It's that spiritual heat. It's also the will, the spirit, the intuitive self, where the chalice, the undivided chalice, is the water. Yeah, and it's so much way like the feeling self, the heart, that side of the intuition, the empathy that connects us all. So I love in this chart when we're looking at the sunrise time. Yeah, we've got this almost perfect fire trine, but it's pointing downward. And it's pointing downward at the moon, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So again, we're seeing this balance of the yin and the yang energies like showing itself to us.
Yeah, it's really, that's another theme that keeps showing up, isn't it? Over and over and over again. There's really divine balance here.
Yeah, and it's amazing because as far as the visible lights go, we've got Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, all in Aries. We've got a Leo moon, we've got a Sagittarius Saturn, and a Gemini Venus. They're all air and fire yang signs.
Yeah.
They're all reflecting the light of an Earth-based Taurus sun.
Yeah.
So as we get further out into space and honor some of the outer planets and some of the asteroids closer to us, we'll see the waters come in. We've seen these Pisces seeds and these Capricorn seeds in these different ways that the yin is behind this expression of the air and the fire. So many traditions teach this, that behind the Shiva is the Shakti. We can see creation, we don't necessarily see creator. And I like to see the feminine as creator and the masculine as creation in this balance. That's also inhale and exhale. I think the symbolism shows this to us. But this is really strong in this chart. It's a very visible yang chart. But there's these hidden ways of the seed in like the grandmother. And that's part of what the demand is, to bring back matriarchal council of grandmothers lineage here, right? So how can Saturn and Sag help with that? And what are the challenges perhaps that a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn bring that might in the end help with that, but probably not immediately so?
Right. Yeah, that's next chapter. Tune in as we continue. Yeah.
We'll start with Saturn next time, huh? Really get into that and then move out to outer space. All right. Woo! I'll
Man.
say again that Gary and I sat down and I said, yeah, let's do this thing and let's really get into the chart. Let's kind of teach astrology as we express this the way that we do it, and Gary's one of my teachers. Like I've said that many times, and I think we inform one another because we have this way of connecting to the sky in what I like to call now earth astrology, or my first teacher, Daniel Jamario, called shamanic astrology, or Gary and his crew right now are calling sky astrology, of this living relationship to the sky. So we're engaging as humans, not just through the yang and through the mind. The body's involved, the heart's involved, yeah. And so, yeah, let's kind of teach that as we look at this chart and honor this movement, honor these people, and see how it's evolving. And we'll do these quick kind of 20-minute shots at each planet, and they're turning out to be an hour or whatever. But if you've heard these words, then you're enjoying it, and we thank you for tuning in and checking it out. We hope it is spreading our intent of connecting our hearts to the hearts of these people who are standing in solidarity.
Stand with Standing Rock, yeah? That's the whole point here. First and foremost, stand with Standing Rock, you all. And, if you get some learning out of this and stuff, in addition, so be it. And hopefully that's exactly the way this can play out, that we can all stand with Standing Rock and we can learn something about ourselves and our world in the process.
Yeah, and so let's all share our medicine as we know what our gift is. Yeah, I mean, this is what we're doing here. Let's share our funds if we can. And all of you, again, an invitation to share your wisdom here. There's a whole field of YouTube comments that you can contribute to. Please, we invite you to share this around if you think you have friends that will enjoy it. And besides that, thank you so much for tuning in and being with us in this strange journey into space for us to find the land once again. Brother Gary, Caton, I love you dearly, sir. And it's
I love you too, man.
in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
All right, bye, y'all. We will see you in space. Love and planets to you.
Aho.